central government that came in directly afterwards, but that is in our manifesto, so the new homes are built to top standards in terms of environmental efficiency. The other one is retrofitting our existing stock. So it's a huge stock, and the Liberal Democrats are proposing a 10-year plan to go back and retrofit with insulation the homes which are currently in the stock, and that will of course include rented ones. Now, one of the innovations in recent years was the introduction of the energy performance certificate and the restriction on renting homes that don't meet a particular standard on that EPC. It's very important that we keep that and also have the regulation around rentals to ensure that that is enforced. And one of the Lib Dem proposals in this area is a national register of landlords to help out with that kind of enforcement.
Thank you. It's not working.
Wonderful. Yeah, 80% of the housing that will exist in the UK in 2050 already exists. So the focus has to be on helping us to get our existing housing more energy efficient. And you're quite right that renters are the ones that are getting a raw deal on this. So the Greens have been long arguing for a nationwide housing retrofit programme. And of course that means different solutions for different people in different situations. So social housing, that's the council's responsibility. Owner-occupiers, they'll have access through the Greens' Fair and Greener Homes Guarantee to a mix, a blend of grants and loans depending on their level of income, and the loans will be affordable and property linked, so if they sell their house, the loan stays with the house rather than with the person. But what about private renters? Well, we would give private renters the right to demand that landlords make energy efficiency improvements to their flats if they're below a certain level. Now, those landlords, as the property owners, will be able to access the same blend of grants and property-linked loans if they need access to it in order to make the retrofit. So there won't be a huge upfront cost to them, so they won't be able to argue that they can't afford it. They will just have to make the repayments on the loan, which will be set at a level that's affordable. And it will improve the value of their property. So it should be a compelling case for landlords that it's worth doing. But if they really don't agree, then the council can, on behalf of the tenants, take it into their own hands and undertake the retrofit as part of the work that they're doing on social housing.
Thank you. Next question we have on housing from Lucy. Lucy, can you put your hands up for the mic? Oh, sorry. What new regulations would you put in place for letting agents and landlords to avoid private rental bidding?
Yeah.
Yeah, but simply the Greens are clear that competitive bidding in the private rental sector shouldn't be allowed, and we would regulate to ensure that. Slight sidebar, because it's not directly related to the bidding, but we would also seek to introduce landlord licensing more widely than it is in place currently. So you'll probably all be aware that landlord licensing exists for certain types of properties here in Bristol, and that's something that I was pushing for from right back when I was a newly elected councillor in 2015. But it still only applies to certain types of properties, and that creates perverse incentives where landlords are sometimes unwilling to a group of unrelated people because they would need a licence for that, whereas they wouldn't for a family. And so we also think that expanding landlord licensing is part of the solution of preventing prices going up, because there are landlords that were trying to avoid the licensing by letting an underpopulated house, and therefore it gets more expensive and it gets harder to access if you're a single adult trying to live in a shared house. So that's something that the Greens in opposition were pushing for, and Bristol City Council, and it's something that now that we're in administration we'll be continuing to pursue as fast as possible.
Thank you. I would expand on that theme actually, that the competitive bidding is a symptom of the problem of a lack of supply. And so rather than banning a symptom, we need to get down to the cause, which is a lack of supply. So I talked a little about building new homes, and to flesh that out, the Liberal Democrats are talking about the equivalent of 10 new towns to be built in the UK. We're talking about giving incentives for brownfield development, and we want to boost council planning departments so that they can really ensure that the right development is put in the right place. In terms of social housing, we have the same target as the Greens, actually 150,000 per year, and I've mentioned a little bit about the compulsory purchase procedure that we think would benefit local authorities, and we also want to end the right to buy if councils think that that's the right thing to do in their area. In addition, we would like to free up houses or utilise the market to do so, where we have lots of second homes or short-term rentals in an area. We want to give councils the ability to charge the equivalent of 5 times the council tax on those landlords, so that the commercial decisions are a little less biased towards the Airbnbs. So in a whole host of ways, we want to bring more homes onto the market so that there is less incentive for competitive bidding for rental homes.
Just to let you know, that's Nicholas Coombs, Lib Dem,
Andrew.
alongside Carla Denyer from the Green Party.
I think we're presenting a dense analysis of 501c3 charity. The biggest issue I have in Commercial Central is the rampant homelessness and streets are filled with people who are sleeping very rough. It's followed me for many years. All these people are addicted to horrible drugs, and that always frustrated me. So, regarding housing, what we do to help the homeless?
Back with me again. Well, the first thing that we would do is to scrap the Vagrancy Act. Now, you may not have heard this is a piece of Dickensian-era legislation making not owning a home illegal. And so that needs to go. It's been a long campaign, the government has moved on it, but they haven't quite got away with it. So scrap the Vagrancy Act and stop treating rough sleepers as criminals. We believe that we can end rough sleeping within the next Parliament, and there are mechanisms to do that. One of them is a legal duty on local authorities to give somewhere safe to stay for homeless people. We can send resources towards the local authorities to deliver the outcomes of the Homelessness Reduction Act, which they should be doing already, but are clearly short on cash on. And one of the smaller tweaks that we can do that should have a real impact in terms of either failing to lose a home or getting home is to end tweak universal credit, which currently pays benefits at different rates depending on whether you're under or over 35. And if you're under 35, then it's assumed that you should be living in a shared home. Now, that's no good if someone's got substance abuse issues and is seeking to get into their first home. They should be given the universal credit at a rate which is appropriate for a single person living in a single dwelling. So there are lots of technical things that can be done, as well as that big picture thing about treating homelessness as a health problem rather than a crime.
Got lots to say on this, so I'll be quick. Firstly, we would end no fault evictions, which is one of the leading causes of homelessness. Second, we would solve the simple problem that for many people facing homelessness, the problem is money in is less than money out, even to cover the basics. So we would immediately increase the basic rate of universal credit by £40 a week and increase minimum wage to £15 an hour, including removing the ageist cap on minimum wage for younger adults. For those who have already become homeless, the Green Party believes in that housing first model of dealing with homelessness, which is basically saying give the person their housing first and then you help them sort out the other issues. You don't make the housing conditional on getting off drugs or jumping through some other kind of bureaucratic hoop that is really quite difficult to do when you're living on the streets. And finally, you mentioned drugs. The Green Party would take a totally different approach to drugs in this country. We are clear that the war on drugs has failed, that the demonising of prohibition does not solve any of the issues caused by problematic drug use in this country. We would treat it as a public health issue if people have addictions, and we would take an approach of decriminalising and regulating, because that's what that only is what will take drugs out of the hands of organised criminals.
Thank you. So the next question we have is on council tax. Do you think it's fair that wealthy people can pay less council tax as a proportion of their income than people on a lower income? And if you don't think it's fair, what would you do to make it fairer?
No, I don't think it's fair, and the Green Party has long argued for replacing the very regressive council tax system with a progressive system along the lines of what the Fairer Share proposal, which I know ACORN is supporting, which is essentially land value tax. This would address the fact that property owners sit on a huge amount of unearned wealth as property prices increase, and yet they're not the ones paying the tax on the property. So, in the long term, we want to replace council tax with land value tax. However, what could we do in the short term with a handful of Green MPs elected to push the Labour government who are not inclined to go for this fairer system? Well, council tax is regressive, but at the moment it's one of the few tools left in the box for local councils, and they are forced to increase it by the maximum amount each year because they're seeing these massive cuts from national government. The only options local councils have to make it slightly less fair is to use the council tax reduction scheme. ACORN members, especially those of you who've been around the block a little bit, will be aware that the previous Labour mayor tried to cut the council tax reduction scheme in Bristol twice, in 2017 and last year, and both times Green councillors led by myself, ACORN, one of the times Lib Dems as well, and various other groups were successful collectively working together in persuading Labour to U-turn on that. So we will keep up the pressure on that, and we will keep up the pressure nationally for Labour to re-evaluate the terribly unfair council tax system.
I can't really say any different other than the slight nuance. So I'll emphasise the time that I stopped the council tax discount from being implemented. I noticed that the mayor was seeking to introduce a benefit change without consulting on it. About 2 weeks beforehand, the Supreme Court ruled that a Labour council in North London doing exactly the same thing was unlawful, so they pointed that out to the administration and they realised that they weren't allowed to do that. So working in planning sometimes has wider public benefits. But I would also agree entirely that council taxes or regressive taxes has no relationship to one's ability to pay. It doesn't even have a relationship to the value of the house. It has a relationship to the rental value of the home in 1990, because every successive government has been too scared to update the rental values the rateable values, just in case it disadvantaged their voters. The right thing to do is indeed a land value tax. And the nice thing about a land value tax is when you set it to the undeveloped value of the land, you can use it to actually incentivise people to develop land in prime locations. So it's another mechanism in order to get more homes built, in order to get a return on something that you would be paying for anyway. So it is all tied together, but you can use the tax system to incentivise growth and the building of new homes as well.
Next question is on housing again. So a recent report found that council properties in Bristol are left empty for an average of 3 months before being re-let. How would you tackle this to make sure people are left in temporary accommodation for months and years?
This is fundamentally that basic administration point again, isn't it? There's absolutely no incentive for the council to keep a property empty. Speaking as a councillor, I care about the revenue that is raised, because people do pay to live in social housing, and so there's no point having that thing going empty. All of the incentives say we should get someone into it, which is also going to improve their quality of life and keep them out of temporary accommodation, which is also incredibly expensive for the council. So it's just inertia and system failure which is holding this stuff back. Now, the council has been run down for a very long time. I was elected to join the council about a month ago now. Ms. Jenny said that it was a Green administration in this council. I will correct that, because the Greens do not have a majority on this council, and the portfolios are led by both Liberal Democrat and Green chairs. And we hope that we can get the council back to delivering its basic services. So no more waste on the energy company, the constant wall overspends, all the rest of it, and the mayor's vanity projects, of course. Let's get the council back to doing what it's supposed to do, which is delivering effective services, including turning around council houses so they can be used.
Well, I agree with with much of what Nicholas has said, so I won't repeat it, except to say that given there's been a 40% cut in local government funding from national government since 2010, that can't be made up with small efficiency measures here and there. To be honest, that can't be made up with however well administered Bristol City Council is, because 40% isn't an efficiency saving, it's cutting into muscle or even into bone. And that's, to be honest, one of the reasons why after 9 years as a councillor, I'm now focusing on trying to get elected as MP, because I can see that the problem is national government cutting that funding to local government. And the Greens aren't shy about talking about the level of investment that's needed and also where it comes from. So there might be a question on this later to go into detail, but we've been clear about the tax changes we need to see, that would put the onus on the really super rich, including a wealth tax that would only apply to those with 10 million or more in wealth, and changes to capital gains and national insurance, that between them would raise 50 to 70 billion pounds a year by the end of the next Parliament, which could go towards investing in properly funded public services, including those provided by local government.
Okay, thank you. Last question we have time for is about bailiffs. Loads of councils use bailiffs to collect council tax. What would you do to stop this practice?
I want to see the ending of the use of bailiffs to collect council house debt. Early intervention and support for people when they start to fall behind on these payments, and an ethical debt collection policy where the backstop is needed, is so much more the compassionate, sensible and even efficient way of dealing with people falling short on their council tax payments. It would also reduce the incredible distress caused by bailiffs turning up at your house at 6 o'clock in the morning, especially for children who can be understandably horribly frightened by that experience. Now, Bristol already has an ethical debt enforcement policy adopted a few years ago with Green support, and that has reduced the use of bailiffs in this city, but it hasn't stopped it. So the new Green-led administration, if I may say that, we have a legal deputy, although Nicholas is quite right, will be looking, and in fact I spoke to the Green chair of the Housing Committee just earlier today, and he has confirmed that he is looking into ways to further reduce and hopefully eliminate the use of bailiffs. My focus as an MP, if I'm elected, will be on what we can do nationally to complement this work by helping to prevent people from getting to the point of falling short on their council tax in the first place, by increasing universal credit, minimum wage, unfreezing local housing allowance, rent controls as we discussed, ending no fault evictions and funding local government properly.
Again, we find ourselves in agreement that the key point here is to change the system before we get to a council tax being owed by someone that can't afford it. Something's gone wrong if we've got a council tax. Firstly, it should be reformed so that it relates to actually your ability to pay it, but we should be using the council tax reduction schemes and community exemption schemes properly so that people who don't have the ability to pay tax are not eligible and chased for it. Bristol City Council does have multiple recourses to get repayment schemes over a long time period, but ultimately there should be, when tax is not paid to the state at any level, an ability to chase it up, because it is public money, and if it is not paid by people who are able to pay it, then that means that services can't be delivered. At the level of council tax, it's a very small amount, and therefore bailiffs should never be necessary. But at the big picture, council tax evasion and avoidance is a problem, and the state needs to have the ability to collect what it is levied, so that it can be levied fairly and then redistributed on services that we all use.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to getting some commitments to our national policies. So these questions are just yes or no answers. So Carla, you can go first. But the first one is, do you support rent controls?
Yes.
Nicola?
I don't support yes/no questions, because the complexity of policy is so great. But if a politician were to give a yes/no answer, then they are deliberately misleading you. I also think that if a public body is trying to push for a yes/no answer, then they also realise that they're trying to get something that sounds easy but is harder to implement. We end up leaving the European Union by accident this way, so I'm not going to give a yes/no to complex
I'll put that
questions.
down as a no. Do you support an end to no-fault evictions?
Yes.
Obviously I do, but I'm not going to give you a yes/no answer.
That's a yes. Do you support increased enforcement to ensure that landlords, housing associations and councils make all homes safe and healthy?
Yes.
This one is actually slightly more specific than rent controls, which could be anything, so yes, of course, I support that.
Do you support investment in building council housing on a mass scale?
Yes.
Define mass. Obviously, we've pledged 150,000 council houses each, so it is exactly the same pledge. But if you want a yes/no question or something that's not defined, I'm not going to give a yes/no answer.
Do you support bringing our railways back into public ownership?
Yes, absolutely.
That's a no. Do you support our buses being brought back into public ownership and management?
Yes, preferably fully public ownership, but in the meantime, franchising is better than nothing.
So note the caveat on management there. So why do buses have to be at public ownership and management, but railways are only ownership? These details matter.
Is that a no?
I've already talked about franchising, so that is public management, yes.
Do you support ending council's use of bailiffs to collect council tax debt?
Yes.
We have that as a direct question, but
Do you support replacing council tax, bedroom tax and stamp duty with a fair tax based on the value of the property with higher charges for second homes?
Yes.
well, a land value tax is not on the value of the property, it's on the value of the land. Technically, so you're wrong, you were caught out on a yes. But we do want to get rid of the bedroom tax.
Great, okay. Well, thank you both for coming. Let's hear it again for our candidates. And I've been pleased to hear some commitments from them regarding issues like affordable housing, unfair eviction banning, building council housing, public transport and more. But no matter who is elected on the 4th of July, whether it's the candidates we heard from today, or perhaps one of the candidates who was keen to explain their policy to us, it could never be a more important time to have an organised community demanding things from those in power. We can't be satisfied staying in our bubbles, talking politics with people we already know. Go and speak about problems in the community to your neighbours that you haven't met. Speak to people at work about pay and conditions. Speak to your family about who they're voting for. We need to build a really broad movement here in Bristol and across the whole country. And that's exactly what we're trying to achieve at ACORN. If you want to help us be a part of that, make sure that you have filled out a membership form. Let's build some real power here and never stop holding our elected officials to account.
Thanks for watching, guys. I had a little problem with the live stream at the beginning, so I'll clip them both together and I will post them later on. And forgive me for sticking with these up to Carla, but peace.